I'm really happy to introduce Stephanie Hanson, who's a teaching specialist in the MELP program. We were just chatting. She has a BA in French and psychology, so I'm really excited about the French, but Spanish has kind of taken over the French in the years following the BA. She also has an MA in ESL, and she's taught ESL at Cornell and Illinois, in addition to here, as well as EFL in 5 different countries. So she's traveled all over the place. And today she's going to be talking about education inside a Greek refugee camp. Please welcome Stephanie.
Thank you. So I've got a ton of information to share about my experience in Greece this summer. I have the summers free. I don't work, so I usually try to go abroad somehow. And this past summer, Greece was interesting to me. I started looking into volunteer opportunities, knowing that they had a lot of refugees there. And it turns out there is a huge need for language instructors in the refugee camps in Greece. So I found a lot of different organizations and NGOs that I could have volunteered with. And I ended up choosing one. So I'm going to talk about the Boat Refugee Foundation, the organization that I volunteered with. I'm going to discuss the 3 sites that we worked on. There were 3 different camps that we had activities on, and sort of the living conditions and activities that were available at each site. And then at the end, I'll also share some resources if you're interested in ways to help yourself. So the Boat Refugee Foundation is a Dutch non-governmental organization. They originally started as more of a search and rescue mission. So a couple years ago, when a huge influx of refugees was arriving on the islands, they were doing more search and rescue, like identifying boats as they were coming, meeting them at sea or on land, and doing immediate medical attention and processing. As that huge wave of immigrants has gotten on the island, and the processing times have gotten really bogged down in terms of them getting granted asylee status or moving on through the refugee processing, people are spending longer and longer in the refugee camp waiting to be processed, which means a lot of the organizations have moved from this sort of immediate medical attention, search and rescue at sea work to providing more ongoing medical and psychosocial support because people are spending months and months in the refugee camps waiting to be processed. And so this organization does both. They have both medical volunteers and psychosocial volunteers. So I was a member of the psychosocial support team, which is mainly, they look for people with a background in teaching, social work, counseling, psychology, those sorts of areas to be working with the immigrants on the island. So I'll be focusing more on that work, but I'll also explain a little bit about the medical work they did too. For the location, I was on the Greek island of Lesvos, so this is all of Greece, and Lesvos is one of the most eastern islands, and you can see this is Turkey, so it was, I think it was like 5 or 10 miles away, depending on which part of the island and where you were on the coastline. It was 5 to 10 miles from Turkey. I could see Turkey from my bathroom window in the volunteer house, or walking down the beach, you could see it. So it was visible. And one of the reasons that they're getting so many refugees immigrating is it's one of the shorter passages to get into Europe. So on the island, Mytilene is the main port town, and so that's where the volunteer house was. That's where we all lived. That's also the site of one of the camps. And then about 20 minutes outside of Mytilene, Moria, that was the site of the biggest camp, the main processing center. And then further north in Mantomalos was a 3rd site that we worked on. That was like a 45-minute drive up the coast to go to that camp. So I'm going to talk about the 3 sites, but most of it will focus on Moria because that was the main reception center where most of the refugees are. So the first site, this is the really north one that was further north on the island, that we called Riots Hotel, or everybody calls Riots Hotel. This was for very vulnerable refugees. So it's an abandoned hotel. And originally it was in a different abandoned hotel, it was a different location. But some anonymous benefactor rented the hotel for a year with the purpose of having it available as housing for refugee families. And then when that lease expired, a charity called Caritas took over the lease. And so it's a charity that's managing this housing. It's run by the people working with that organization as well as Greek social workers. There's around 40 people that live in that hotel. I never got a clear definition of what very vulnerable refugees meant, but I can tell you that a lot of the families there had newborn babies. There was also a woman in my English class there who was unaccompanied. She was older, like I want to say in her 60s. She had come from Syria with her father who died in one of the other camps. And she never married, didn't have kids, so I think she was considered vulnerable because of the death in her family and being a single woman. So there are different ways that they were identified to get moved from the main center to this place. It was nice. I mean, it was kind of like a little apartment building, a very like neighborhood-ish atmosphere. So everybody had their hotel room, which was like their apartment, and then the kitchen that had housed a restaurant in the past was just open, so everybody could cook in the kitchen. They had our organization did medical visits there twice a week, as well as another organization. We gave English classes there for adults and also for kids. Other NGOs also had activities, I think like music lessons and English games for kids. That Syrian woman who was by herself, she also taught Arabic to the kids. She was an Arabic teacher in Syria, so she was giving Arabic lessons to the kids there. The organization I worked with has since stopped working at this site because the need just wasn't very great. And I heard that this fall, this site is actually closing down. So I think everyone who had been living there has moved on in their refugee process and are no longer living there. So that site is ending or about to end. The second site, CARLA, this was the one that was in Mytilene, the main town. This one was run by the local Greek government, and it had very much of like a village or summer camp atmosphere. There are about 700 people living there, and they're all families with kids. And you can kind of see on the map, all of these white blocks are cabins. So they use shipping containers, ISO boxes, like shipping containers are cabins that the families live in. So each family has a cabin, and then they'll have a few bunk beds in it. A lot of them, and they're like outside, they put up some shading and got some chairs, so they have like a porch area outside, and then their main bedroom, living area inside. And then there's communal bathrooms and showers at a couple places around the camp. Over on this top corner, that row of boxes are the cabins that the non-governmental organizations used. And then there's like soccer fields, there's a couple playgrounds for kids, there's an amphitheater where they show movies, there's dance parties. There's lots of kids just running around unattended all the time. So it's very much like a small town feel where it's pretty safe. Parents let their kids run around. There's activities happening all the time. So this is a picture of some of the medical volunteers walking into the camp. And you can see that's the row of cabins that the NGOs had. and here's the playground, there are the soccer fields over here. So it's not a bad place. It's not a terrible place to live. This was our cabin for our organization, and on the inside, you can see it's decorated with all sorts of kids' art activities or art projects. We activities that we had there were kids' activities, which was arts and crafts, like play-based learning. So all the volunteers speak English. The kids are mainly from Syria, Afghanistan, and Congo, so they speak Arabic, Farsi, and French. But the common language is English, so when we were showing them how to make a craft project, it was all in English. So they're getting English vocabulary and instruction, but it's all play-based. These aren't like formal classes. It's very much arts and crafts with some English supporting that. And then we hang up their projects in the cabin. We also, in this cabin, we had art and board games for adults most evenings a week. And that would typically be like chess, painting, making bracelets and necklaces. We bring in materials for that. And when I was there, it tended to be like older teens that were going, 16 to 20-year-old Afghani guys, mostly came to play chess and drink tea. And they were super fun to chat with and talk to and debate, rap, and they were funny. And then we also, in that camp, we would have movie nights 2 nights a week. So in the amphitheater, we would show a cartoon or a movie for kids. And that was incredibly chaotic because there are usually 50 to 70 kids running around with no parents in the amphitheater. So one of the challenges with doing the activities here is most of these kids, and when I say kids activities, they were like 5 to 10-year-olds that we worked with. A lot of them have never had formal schooling. So they're missing all of those social skills like wait in line, take your turn, be patient, share with other people. And they also just have not had like strict schedules, and they still don't. So it would kind of be like, oh, there's something happening, I'll pop in and see what's going on, stay for 20 minutes, run around some more. So they didn't have a lot of structure in their life before, I think, and in the camp even. But we did have some activities to get them some of that, to try to get them like better prepared for when they do eventually go to school. In Kartepe, we also, like one day, we did water games for the kids' activities because there was a heat wave and it was so hot, so we were just doing a lot of games, or songs or dances to help them cool down the water. Also in Kartepe, we would do women's excursions. So twice a week, there was a sign-up sheet for, I think, once a week it was for Farsi-speaking women, and once a week it was for Arabic-speaking women. And up to 8 of them could sign up, and we'd take them out of the camp, away from their family, away from kids, away from responsibilities and worries, to go do something fun somewhere on the island. So during the summer, that usually was going swimming at the beach. But they would do other activities during other times of the year. And then there's also a support group for Farsi speakers that one of the longer-term volunteers ran. And that was to talk about self-care strategies, empowerment. They had, like, one volunteer was a yoga instructor, so she came in and did some yoga workshops with them, talking about, like, identifying goals and working on self-development, things like that. Also in Kartepe, we did a beach cleanup one day, so that was organized, like, all of the different NGOs there, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 of them, all organized a Saturday beach cleanup. So we went, this is just behind the refugee camp, so it was the area at the beach where the refugees tended to go swimming, and we cleaned up litter with a bunch of other volunteers and refugees to do that. We also did a self-care campaign where we made flyers in English, French, Arabic, and Farsi. And we went through the camp giving them out to each family that it was kind of tips for self-care, like, you know, do you have friends to talk to? Are you sleeping enough? Are you eating like healthy foods? Are you getting enough time like away from responsibility? So kind of like a checklist of things to help them. And also as a way to connect and let them know there was a psychologist available on the camp if they needed more support. So there were other activities going on. For some reason this photo got, I don't know what happened to it, but it was a schedule of the weekly activities that different organizations had at the camp. So you could still kind of see, like, they had a sewing circle, they had activities for teen boys, they had activities for teen girls, they had ladies' night, they had movie for kids, movie for adults. So there's like lots of different activities going on in the camp. English classes, Greek classes, and music classes were the main educational opportunities. So those 16 to 20-year-old Afghani boys that I was talking about, they every day had 1 hour of English, 1 hour of Greek, 1 hour of music, which was like guitar or keyboard. And they were, I mean, I think they were making the best of the situation, and their English was like getting pretty strong, actually. I can't talk about their Greek, but I assume that was also growing. But I think for them it was a little more frustrating because they had been in normal schooling at some point in their life, and they did have, you know, as a 17-year-old, they were thinking about, like, well, I'd like to be an engineer and I want to go to university. But I spent 3 hours doing these classes, and so like they did recognize they were falling behind educationally and not in a normal high school setting. So I think they did have more sort of concerns about their future, but we're still doing something to work toward improving somehow. And since I left, so I came back here in late August, and I think we continued activities in Karatepe for another month-ish, but now that Dutch organization no longer works in this one either, because they wanted to focus all of their efforts on the main camp, which is Moria. So there's a little bit of funny, fun stuff happening because I did this on a PC and now it's on a Mac, so I apologize for that. But in Moria, this is the main camp on the island. It's mostly single men, single women, and that's supposed to say, yeah, single men, single women. There's some unaccompanied minors, so people under 18 traveling alone. And more and more there are families with kids. So typically the families with kids are supposed to be in the better camp, Karatepe, but that camp is full and more people keep coming. So now there's more and more kids living in Moria. This camp, this is a shot from Google Street View, just to give you an idea of what the camp layout is. It used to be a military base, and it is now run by the Greek military police. So the feel, the atmosphere there is very different from the other two sites. Like the hotel was very much like an apartment building in a neighborhood, and the Karatepe was very much a village. The Greek man who managed it called it a village. He refused to call it a camp. He said it's a village. Everyone here is a community. This felt much more like a prison, kind of, in the sense that there are guards and police all over, barbed wire, fencing, razor wire. There are fights and riots that are happening there too. It's built to house 2,500 people. Right now, well, when I last updated this PowerPoint, it was 5,000, but this morning on my Facebook feed, now it's almost at 6,000. So it is well over capacity by thousands of people. This shows another picture of the camp. So it's built on this hill, and it's mostly cement and gravel. So it's very dusty, very dirty. You can see it's all those cabins that I was talking about. So there's like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. That's how we kind of have addresses in the camp. So I live on level 2. Oh, the doctors are on level 4. These were volunteer boxes, and our medical cabin used to be there, but then we moved up to the top to level 4. I titled this Moria No Good because everybody in the camp, if they know 3 words of English, those are the 2 words they know, Moria No Good. Everybody gets a bottle of water in the morning, like a big bottle of water. To get food, you wait in line for an hour, over an hour to get food. I've heard from some of my students they get food. The food is usually rice with maybe like some vegetables, and then twice a week they get chicken or fish. So it's not great food. A lot of the refugees will cook their own food, so they either have a campfire, they just make a fire, or got a little cook stove, and they'll go to the grocery store and buy their own food. They get, every adult refugee gets, I think it's like $90 or $100 a month from where, I'm not sure, but they get this salary once a month. So some of them use it and go into town to buy groceries or clothes or a cell phone or, credits to be able to call their parents. I know I was talking to one, they, in his cabin, and I should say, so in these cabins there are 15 to 20 people living in a cabin. They're just full of bunk beds. And you don't necessarily know everybody living in your cabin. It's not families, it's just people placed together. They tend to put people by country or by region. So like there's the area where most of the Syrians are, where most of the Congolese are, where like the row where the Bangladeshis are. And so one of them was telling me, everyone in my cabin, we worked together and bought a fridge. So they had like one of those small refrigerators so they could keep more food in the cabin and cook a little better on a daily basis. So there is some community work happening there. This video I took from an immigrant's Facebook page that I follow. But it's just, he filmed it because it was a really windy day, but I'm showing it because I think it shows you kind of the conditions. So there's barbed wire, there's fencing everywhere, there's garbage going around, and it's dusty. So the cabins have been all full, so now there's more and more tents. People live in tents. Cabins for everybody. They hang laundry up to dry. So that's just kind of what the camp looks like. It's not normally that windy, but that's what it looks like. So in the camp, we had a medical cabin. We did, which I'll talk a little more about, we had social shifts. So during the evening around dinner time, we would walk around just to chat with refugees. And the first time they scheduled me for that shift, I felt kind of weird, like I'm just going to go up to strange people and chat, like why? But it ended up being one of my favorite activities to do because the idea was just to make some connections because they spend a lot of time just sitting around waiting. They don't have a lot to do. And this was, or just being processed, like in terms of the paperwork, their immigration counseling, their food, getting their water, getting their clothes. And so this was a way to connect on more of the human level. What have you been up to? Did you know that there's a movie night tomorrow? So I found a lot of them were actually really receptive and happy to chat. So we did social shifts a couple nights a week. And then we also got, during my time there, we got a cabin that another organization vacated. So we were developing that into a community center. The idea being that we'd start having more classes there, have a library of materials, a place where they could come hang out and socialize, have tea, and then also starting up a new school for kids. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So with the medical team, this was our original medical cabin, and then, like I said, we moved to another location for the medical cabin. But it was supposed to be for acute medical care, meaning like more emergency situations where people needed medical attention. But in reality, this became more like a general practice. And they saw a lot of people with chronic health conditions as well, and a lot of psychological problems. And so our organization, we had the evening and overnight shift for the medical team. There was another group that did the daytime medical clinic, and then from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning, our group had volunteers there, volunteer doctors and volunteer nurses. And then they usually had somebody from the psychosocial team who also went on a medical shift to do the registration when a patient came, and crowd control. So we would ask to see their paperwork and write down why they were there to see the doctor and just maintain order, like your next and your second. And yes, so this is me getting ready to sleep in the medical cabin, because when we had an overnight shift, usually we would be busy until maybe 2 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock. And then it would wind down, so we would sleep for a few hours. If there were an emergency, someone pounded on the door, and then the doctors would go help them. But usually it got pretty busy in the evening because it wasn't so hot. So that's when more of the refugees would come out and would do things like see the doctors. This is the view, so when I would sit and register patients, that was my view, looking out over the camp. So it's just fencing everywhere. And you can see this is another cabin where people lived. They have air conditioners. They did have air conditioning and electricity. This is one of the registration lists of patients waiting to see the doctor. So I included this so you could see that there are people from all over. The main countries represented were Syria, Afghanistan, and Congo. That's where most of the refugees were from. But you can see there were people from all over the Middle East, several West African countries. I also met a man from the Dominican Republic there, and I asked him, "Why are you here?" And he said, "I want to go to Spain." And, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "I want to help." So there are people from all over, but mainly Syria, Afghanistan, and Congo. And you can also see, like, they would come with a variety of problems for why they want to see the doctor. So some of them were more acute, like a skin rash. Okay, yeah, that's an immediate thing the doctors can help with. And like, you can go back. But some of them were just sort of ongoing, like headache, backache, stomachache, general aches, which were often more like psychosomatic problems, where they didn't sleep well because they had a lot on their mind, a lot of problems they were trying to work through. And I also found that a lot of times people would say headache, like they were there because they had a headache, and then once they got into the office with the doctor, it was a much more traumatic psychological stuff that would come up. Or like this family brought her 7-year-old girl because she just wasn't talking anymore. She could talk, and she used to talk, but she stopped talking. So there were a lot of psychological issues and not a lot of resources for them. So they would come to the clinic, which was not really the appropriate source for them to get help. There was, I think, 2 psychologists on the island, 1 or 2 psychologists on the island. And I heard that the wait to get an appointment with them was like 2 months. So people would come to the doctor trying to get help somewhere.
Were there interpreters?
That's a good question. So our volunteer organization occasionally had volunteers who spoke Arabic or who spoke French. But we would also recruit refugees to be volunteers with us. So there was a pretty core group of a couple Afghani guys, a guy from Sudan, and a few Syrians that would show up and help translate because their English was strong, and then they obviously knew their native language. And they would just volunteer to help us. So if somebody came but couldn't communicate with the doctor, they'd have an interpreter there to help. But sometimes our organization used to kind of hire them, and then they decided that was putting too much pressure on them or too many expectations. Where like they've already got a lot on their mind, and they don't necessarily need to be hearing other people's problems too. So my organization changed the policy to be that if they could show up whenever they wanted to show up. If they wanted to leave and stop their shift, they could stop whenever. Like they didn't have a schedule for volunteering. But a lot of them just came during the night because they wanted to be helpful and they enjoyed, talking with people and wanted something to do. But occasionally we'd be working for a few hours and there were none of the interpreters showed up. So then we'd have signs in French, English, Farsi, and Arabic saying, unfortunately, we don't have an interpreter. Please go find someone and come back. So I would do a lot of body language then, like, find someone, come back. There's nobody to talk with you. So they just do their best to try to find someone to help. Okay, we also did a dental campaign at one point. We got a bunch of donations of toothbrushes and little travel toothpaste and stuff. And so we were in the kids area of the camp. We were doing demonstrations on how to brush your teeth. And then we went through the camp and gave out toothbrushes and toothpaste. So we did do some other activities. But my main focus in that camp was the English classes. So we set the schedule of having class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 2 hours every afternoon. There were about 15 students that came very regularly. I had room in the cabin I had 20 chairs. So I had room for 20 people. And once those were full, I kind of just had to turn people away. So usually there were 15 regulars and then some random people that would show up because maybe they were walking by and saw something's happening, check it out, or their friend kind of brought them. And, they might come back and they might not. Most of my students were from Congo, and then I had a few from Afghanistan, Syria, Pakistan, and Mali. But I also had some show up from Ethiopia, Eritrea, Morocco, Guinea. So there was a wide variety. The reason most of my students were from Congo is when we were recruiting in the camp, during that social shift where we walked around in the evening, that's when they had me advertise that we were going to have English classes and have people sign up. So I did that for a few shifts, and we had 85 people sign up for English classes. And I said, I cannot teach 85 people because we do not even have room for 85 people. But so we had the list, we set the schedule, we announced, okay, classes will start, it'll be Friday at 4 o'clock. And then on that first Friday, my coordinator said, well, you should go to the camp early and walk around and gather people for the class. And I said, well, I'd rather see who comes. We told them it's Friday, 4 o'clock. If they remember and come, they'll be more dedicated and I'll know that they'll be more serious students. And she said, no, we still need to send people to go through the camp and remind them to come. And I said, okay, there's only room for 20 people. Stop when you get 20 people. So I went to the room and started setting up the chairs and the marker board. And 2 volunteers went through the camp. And they went down the side where all the Congolese are housed. And they said, English, English. And the guys said, yeah, we know, Friday, 4 o'clock. And the volunteer said, that's now. It's Friday, it's 4 o'clock. So it ended up, I was glad that my coordinator really pushed that we had to go gather them because they had no idea what day it was. They knew English class will start on Friday, but they didn't know, oh, it's Friday, because they have no reason to keep a schedule for anything. It was really easy to lose track of the days and the time. So then all of them, then we grabbed a pen, and they had this row of 20 guys marching up the hill to go to class. So they only went through the one section, got 20 people, so we're full, and brought them up to the class. So that's how most of my students ended up being from Congo, because that was just the section they walked through first. I did not have a placement test. I wasn't really sure who was going to show up or what level of English they were going to have. It ended up being a beginner level, like kind of daily needs survival English is what I geared it at, assuming they already know the alphabet and can do a little communication, like, hi, how are you? My name is Stephanie, that kind of stuff. So that's where I ended up aiming it. On the first day, I did a needs assessment where I had different topics, and I asked for a show of hands. So how many of you want to do numbers, telling time, describing your family, clothing, shopping? The problem is they raise their hand for everything, so, so they just wanted it all. So that didn't really help me with like prioritizing their needs. But the general idea was you can answer some basic questions and you know the alphabet. And then people sort of self-selected after that. So I'd have people that heard there's an English class, they'd show up and see, oh, this is really easy. Like, see ya. And they'd leave. And then I'd have people who came with zero English, and they saw right away they were really lost because they couldn't write anything or understand anything. So they maybe would stay for an hour and go. But it worked out, like they sort of self-selected to that beginner level. So this was the original space for my class. There was another shipping container, and you can see we're just really crowded in there with all of the chairs that I had. There is an air conditioner, but there was no electricity. So it got really hot really fast. And I have images of all of us dripping sweat onto the worksheets that we were working on, but they were so diligent and they still came every day even though it got so hot so fast. And so the first day it worked. I was happy. We had 20 people. They were all motivated. I gave them my phone number for WhatsApp so that I could send them reminders about English class. And that ended up being a really good way to communicate. So I didn't have to go early and walk through the camp to remind people. I would just send them, remember, we have class today, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And I also, they would do homework through WhatsApp. So I would say, send me 5 sentences with what you did yesterday. They would, so then they're communicating with each other and practicing on WhatsApp. We made a group. So the second day, I went to class, and there was a riot happening in the camp. And the guard said, you cannot go in, we are evacuating all of the volunteers. And I got this through WhatsApp, somebody in the camp videotaped it. Whoops, that's not it. Just to kind of show you what happens when there's a riot. So it's not like people are running around crazy, but there is a big fire. Fights would break out pretty regularly too. This ended up burning. The medical cabin we used to be in was completely destroyed. So we were really fortunate that we had moved to a different site. And then there were several other cabins that were damaged. And that is how we ended up getting cabins that other NGOs vacated, so we cleaned them up to make that community center that I was mentioning earlier. In a previous presentation I gave about this, somebody asked, well, why are there riots? What are they rioting about? And I think the big thing is frustration, because people are there for months, like 8, 9, 10, 11 months. One of my Afghani students was there for a year before he had his interview. And the interview is to see, like, can we grant you status as an asylum seeker? And then he had his interview, and he was still waiting 3 months with no answer on his interview. So he'd already been he's now been there a year and a half. And then other people come and they're there for a month or two and get processed and moved right away. So there's a lot of frustration, a lot of just waiting with nothing to do except thinking about your problems. There's also, you saw all the different countries and languages that are represented there. So there's a lot of communication problems. There's a lot of cultural clashes. It was super hot in the summer, like 95 degrees, 100 degrees, very hot. So, tempers and patience run out faster than people aren't getting enough food, they're not sleeping well. So there's just a lot of factors contributing to this tension that's constantly in the camp, and then some days it would kind of explode. So I don't know exactly who started it. I don't know that they ever could pinpoint that, but there was a riot, a fire started, more people get agitated and join in. Fights could go like that too, where it might be a couple people fighting, but then it could grow into a bigger fight at some point. So we were always, we had evacuation training a few times a month, and we were always supposed to be really vigilant, like if things felt tense or off, like our safety was important to get out of the camp. So my second day, I did not get to teach my English class because this was happening, and my first thought was, because my class was actually just outside the camp in this extra annex of cabins, and I said, well, I don't have to go in, I can still teach my class. And the guards were like, no, no, you can't teach today. So then the following day, class got back to normal. They started coming Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was a good group. They became friends too. It was a nice way for them to have something to occupy their minds, something to be like working toward or improving, their life. So after we got a bigger, nicer cabin and cleaned it up after that fire, this was our new location, so I had room for more than 20 people. We had working electricity, fans, air conditioning. It was nice. So more and more people were coming to the class. I also identified a few people who were English teachers in their countries. So she was an English teacher in Syria for like 20 years. He was an English teacher in Ghana, and IT. He taught English and IT. And Ghana is English is an official language in Ghana, so he was doing high school English, like language arts. But so both of them, I said, oh, would you be interested in teaching English classes here? And they loved that idea. Yes, I have nothing to do. All I do is sit around all day. I would love to teach again. I identified a couple other people who were teachers in their country, an Iraqi guy, and a guy from, one of the interpreters from Sudan. He also was interested in teaching. So we got them together. They started coming to my class and being kind of teaching assistants with me. And then once we had the cabin more set up and a schedule organized, which happened after I left, they formed a teacher preparation group. And so they would meet each week, go through the textbooks that we had available, decide on their lesson, what photocopies they wanted, and now they are teaching English classes. So instead of just one teacher teaching, now there's 3 or 4 that are teaching, and they expanded it to more students. This was our last day, or my last day of class. But what I did was for all of the guys that had been attending, I sort of indicated like they're really beginner, they're sort of level 1 and they'd be level 2, and we were able to kind of have levels of English classes, which we didn't have when I started there. And now also since then, they've started having classes for kids because more and more kids are at the camp. So this is registration day where they're having families come and register their kids to start going to classes. And I believe they're getting English classes, math classes, and there might be some Arabic classes happening for the Arabic-speaking kids. But I know it's English and math for sure. And again, they recruited, so they found other refugees who were teachers or had teaching experience, so they're teaching. As of last month, I think there were like 55 to 60 kids going to class, and that's growing still. Yeah, English, math, and their native language. They meet 3 times a week for classes. So the idea was giving them more ownership and more purpose, and because it's not super sustainable to have a volunteer teach classes. I was there for 2 months, so I did do a more extended summer class, I guess. But a lot of volunteers are there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and so it's not really sustainable for them to teach a couple classes and leave. And it's more sustainable for the teachers to be residents themselves, so they can be giving more consistency to the classes. And then in the island, there were also other educational resources. So another group called Swiss Cross, One Happy Family. They have 2 names, I wasn't really clear on that. But they offered English classes. So some of my students went to that organization for English classes, and they came to mine. They had to go into the town, so they had to go walk or take a bus into town for that, whereas my classes were in the town, and easier for them to get to. There's also this support center in town. They had English classes for kids, English classes for adults, Greek classes, and computer classes. And I know some of my students would go into town for those classes as well. But again, it wasn't as convenient because they had to get into town. It's like a 20 or 30-minute car ride. So by bus, it took longer. And if they walked, it took like an hour and a half. Okay. So if you are interested in helping, I would highly recommend the group that I worked with, Boat Refugee Foundation. It's a Dutch-run organization, so their website, the link is in Dutch, but they have it all in English and in Dutch. They require a 2-week minimum commitment. And like I said, they take medical volunteers, but also psychosocial people with a teaching background. Other resources that I have found useful. Wait, could you go back? Oh, sure. Sorry. If you Google Boat Refugee Foundation, you'll find their website too. Other resources that I found useful, there are a lot of different Facebook groups for volunteers. There's one for Athens volunteers, like if you're focused on Athens. There's one for Lesvos, the island I was on. There's one in general, just volunteering in Greece. So it's a lot of NGOs and volunteers kind of like looking for each other and connecting with each other. Lesvos Mosaic is that community center I mentioned where they have different classes. They also take volunteers. And then the first website is just general information about volunteering in Greece, like materials to bring, what to pack, finding housing, stuff like that. My organization, part of the reason I chose them is they have a volunteer house, so I didn't have to worry about finding housing. It costs €10 a night to live there. And then there's a kitchen. You share bedrooms with other volunteers. We take turns cooking dinner for everybody. You contribute to the food jar for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But the housing was taken care of, and they had rental cars, so transportation was taken care of for us too. So it was convenient that we didn't have to look for any of that stuff. Another organization that I did communicate with a bit was the Refugee Language Initiative. This is a British organization. They have a website and a Facebook group. Currently, they are working in Greece, France, Lebanon, Serbia, and Ukraine. And they specifically look for English or language teachers, not just English, but mainly English language teachers. So they're looking for volunteers with that kind of experience. And then they sort of coordinate where they see needs in these different locations. So if they know of an organization looking for someone to teach little kids, and they'll like help the volunteers match up with that. And I ended up not volunteering with them because they didn't provide housing support. But the director that I spoke to was really nice, and she shared materials. When I told her I was going to volunteer with the Dutch group, she said, "Let me know if you need anything." She emailed me materials and resources too. So, And then if you are interested in helping remotely by staying here, there are two organizations I found where you can do Skype tutoring or online tutoring. So you'd be matched up with a refugee somewhere in Europe, and you'd meet with them whatever schedule you make to do online tutoring. The Paper Airplanes one was founded by a woman, I think, who graduated from Carleton College. And so you Skype 2 to 4 hours a week. And then School Inside is specifically working with children, I believe, and you just Skype with them for 1 or 2 hours a week. So I threw a lot of information at you because I have a lot to say about this, but we have a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes for questions. I'm a little lost. Sorry. This one? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was curious because you talked and showed, all the barbed wire and the fences and stuff, but yet they're allowed to go into town for classes.
Oh, yeah.
So they can come and go.
Yeah, that's a good question because I was kind of surprised by that too. It has a prison feel, but it is not a prison. They can come and go as they please, and they do. They'll walk into town to buy groceries or to go shopping when they get their allowance each month or to take classes. But I think the reasoning for all of that fencing and barbed wire is to sort of contain sections so that if a problem happens in one section, they can contain it. So like if there's a fight, it's not going to turn into a mass brawl like throughout the whole camp. It'll just stay in that section. And then they can get police and guards in there faster and concentrate to calm it down. So I think it's more of a security issue. But yeah, they're free to come and go as they want. This in all 3 sites, they can come and go as they want.
It looked like most of your students were male. Was that true of the camp, or was that just by accident?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the basically all of my students were male. I think in the 2 months I had 3 women show up, and they would come for one class and say, "I'm the only woman," and then they would come back. The camp was predominantly single males. There were single women and there were families, and they tended to be housed in a separate, secure area for safety reasons. Mm-hmm. But it's mostly men. And part of that, I think, is, it's a dangerous journey to be, if you're leaving from Syria or Congo or wherever, like you're making your way up through into Turkey, crossing Turkey, getting on a boat, crossing the Mediterranean or Aegean in this case, to get to the islands. So I think a lot of people, a man will go, try to get established somewhere, and then send for the rest of his family when they have a more direct, safer way to go. Mike?
What were town camp relations like?
That's a good question. I think on Lesvos, the Greeks were pretty welcoming to the refugees. Greek culture is very hospitable. Like they're very proud of being friendly and welcoming and warm and wanting to help people. And I heard this over and over. And I think one of the ways that Greece is struggling is that they're still having economic problems and they've got a lot of unemployment. And I talked to some Greeks who have been out of work for months or a year or underemployed. And so on the one hand, like they can see people who need help like immediately living near them, but also like they don't have a job or they have a part-time job and it's not enough. So there's a big struggle economically in terms of just having enough money and resources and work for people. I think on the island it was a little less tense because the islanders could see immediately, like, yeah, boats are coming every day, and I see people like with their blanket and life vest going to the camp, and they come in and shop in my store. But when I went at the end of my volunteer time, I spent a few days in Athens as a tourist, and when I talked to Greeks there, it was much more negative. And I think that's because it's a big city, culture there, more competitive and tougher living, but also a little more removed. So like they're seeing refugees coming to the mainland. They've already been granted asylee status or refugee status and are trying to find housing and work and are competing with the locals. Whereas on the island, it was much more of an immediate, like, yeah, you need help and I will help you. So I think it kind of depends where on Greece, how the relations were, but there's tension for sure, understandably.
What countries were most getting accepted into?
I think Syrians got accepted pretty easily because it was easier for them to approve.
Into which countries?
So the way that this process works is you land somewhere in Europe. So Greece was a hot spot because it's an easier to get in. Then you get registered as like, okay, you come here, you're not documented, but you're going to apply for asylum. And then you at some point have an interview to kind of, it's your opportunity to show that you're seeking asylum, like you actually do have something, a danger that you can't go back. If that is approved, you're free to live anywhere within Greece. And so you get your Greece residence. I don't know the official term, but it's not like permanent residence, but like you're legally allowed to live anywhere in Greece and you can get work, you can look for jobs. And so for many of them, that's sufficient. Like, that's fine, okay, I can leave the island now. So if you come to the island, you have to stay on the island until you are processed to be able to go somewhere else. So that's part of the frustration of just waiting around on the island. But so yeah, so then you get approved, you can live anywhere within Greece. And some people stay on the island because they've made friends and it's comfortable and they know their way around, and some of them want to go to Athens because there's more resources or more opportunities. And then some of them have an ultimate goal, like I'm trying to get to Sweden because I have an uncle there. I want to go to Germany because I've heard good things about it. So some of them then apply for a next level to get into another country. So that's a very rough overview of the system. So, and several of my students, I'm still in touch with them on WhatsApp. So I've had like 5 or 6 of them have told me, I got my papers, I'm going to Athens. So they did get approved. And these were mostly Congolese. So, I mean, they're getting approved too, to leave the camp and